Hi. So we're going to go over with this one perceptual processing, which I don't remember how I uploaded on our Google site. It may be in that intro PowerPoint that I started with day one, or it might be a separate one. I don't know. I've updated these so many times over the years, so we're just going to go with this one. So we've talked about things like schemas, right? And how that's like the filter we see our world through, and we have schemas for certain things, like what a cloud looks like, or a schema for a bird, basically geared by our understandings or our experiences in the world. And then we mentioned perceptual sets, which we're going to talk about more here. And perceptual sets just being this idea that we really focus on expectations and create these perceptual sets. So this one kind of talks about perception in general, how we organize our expectations of perception, and then we also go more into some of like the optical illusions and look at each of those. So hold on and get ready for your minds to be expanded about perception, because this is kind of weird stuff. Just explaining our thought patterns. So we've already gone over perceptual sets. We went over these once, but it's the tendency to perceive or notice some aspects of the available sensory data and ignore others. So if we look at this, we kind of already saw this example, but the idea is it a letter? Is it a number? What's going on? But if we were to put it in each of these, all of a sudden, we have this perceptual set that it's in, and it helps us make an informed decision about what we're seeing. So the Loch Ness Monster is always a fun one to look at for this unit, because the idea that this is one of the famous pictures of the Loch Ness Monster. And if I give you the expectation that it's a monster, like it's a dinosaur that hangs out in Loch Ness, you go in with the expectation that, oh yeah, I need to pick out the parts that match this, that fit into my expectations of seeing a monster. Or if I just told you this is a really grainy picture of a log floating out there, you can also see that. So depending on what I tell you to see, your brain can kind of manipulate this stuff and have it fit in. So here's another way that perceptual sets work, is that this piece of toast is a great example. So this is just a piece of toast, but people have claimed that the face of the Virgin Mary is in there. You can kind of resemble or see a face. Our brains just really, really enjoy picking up faces and things. It's one of the normal things that we do. We're really honed into finding faces in all things, so that kind of explains why we see a face here. But just like the Xerox copy, there's nothing there. It's just a pattern, but our brains pick up on something because we don't like chaos. We don't like having things that are unexplained. So this piece of toast sold for $28,000 on eBay, and some casino bought it and took it on a world tour to see the miraculous Virgin Mary toast. People should probably know about perceptual sets, and then they wouldn't pay all this money for a piece of toast. Because the second I tell you that there's a face in there, you look for it and you find it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, they're right. When there's really nothing there. It's just your brain and the expectation and schemas and perceptual sets, all this coming together to make you see a face in this toast. Other things like perceptual sets that are kind of fun to pick on. The idea that in this photo, there's something inappropriate going on. And if you look at the priest, kind of below the belt region, people will say that something inappropriate was drawn into this scene. And the second you point it out, they say, oh my gosh, that's so inappropriate. Look at that. But if we look at the character in other ways, his knee is actually jetted out. That's how they've drawn it when you look directly at it this way. So yeah, it would jet out the other way if we're looking at it on the sides. But if I tell you it's something inappropriate, that's definitely what you're going to take it as. This is another fun one from Hollywood. 3 Men and a Baby. Rumors spreading that, oh my gosh, there's a ghost in one of the scenes of a little boy that died. You can see his outline or his face in the window in one of the scenes. And yeah, you go and look, and if you watch the film, you're like, oh my gosh, that's creepy. There is a face in the curtains. Well, if you paid attention earlier in the film, there's a cardboard cutout of Ted Danson. And somehow it just gets placed in the window at some point in time, which makes sense because it's already by the window in the second shot. People just don't pay attention to that stuff. And when they make up these rumors, yeah, it totally sticks and you think it's real because it's fitting into your perceptual sets of what the expectation is. So, perception activity here. All I want you to do is look at these words for a moment. And then look at these ones. And then what word do you read? Oftentimes people will say the word rope or rape, and a couple will say ripe. The thing is, I kind of primed you, because if you look at the text of this word, it heavily matches the text of this word that I made bolder, thicker. You stared at it first, and they're, you know, pretty strong words. And then these are in a much more passive tense, passive text option font or whatever. And when I put you this, you know, I primed you to see something. So a lot of kids will be like, oh my God, why did I think of that word? It makes me feel so bad. Don't, because I primed you. I kind of like oiled the machine to know what you were going to go to. I manipulated your path of thinking that you were going to go down. So I think I had mentioned this in one of the Zoom meetings I did with one of the classes, but how subliminal messages aren't real, but priming is very real. So priming is this non-conscious form of human memory concerned with perceptual identification of words and objects. So I can do things that trigger you to feel a certain way or to think a certain way based on what I expose you to. So things like music interpretation, or it can affect interpretation. So I gave the example in one of the classes where if I showed up on screen and I had sad music playing and, hi Pancake, and I had sad music playing, and then I also had like pictures of funerals and cemeteries and stuff. It would be very possible that when I asked, hey, can you spell, sorry, my cat's going to get in the way. Can you spell the word mourning? You guys would spell it M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, because I primed you with like really sad sounding music about death, pictures of death and cemeteries. Versus, same with if I said, hey, can you spell the word die? You'd go D-I-E instead of D-Y-E. Versus if I had pictures of sunrises and the sounds of birds chirping, and I said spell morning, you would have spelled it M-O-R-N-I-N-G, because I had primed you, right? I had helped select which path you were going to take and what words you thought of and how you felt, because I primed your senses that way. All right, if you stare at this picture, you may see a man with a saxophone, or you may see a woman's face. I could have primed you, though, because if I showed you this first, he's a much more outlined man with a saxophone, and the first thing you would have seen in this picture would have been the man with the saxophone. Versus if I had showed you this first, and then gotten you over here to this one, you definitely would have seen the woman's face first, right? It can just prime you and kind of set you up for what I want you to look at first. All right, another principle, context. If I know nothing about basketball, which I really don't, and I look at this picture, I'm going to think, oh, that guy in yellow, he's such a tiny, cute little basketball player. He's so short, right? Because look at this other guy. And in my head, like all basketball players are really tall. And so the guy in the yellow seems like the anomaly. He seems like the short one. And that's just based on my expectations. But if you know anything about basketball, that guy in the back, he's like, I think he's over 8 feet tall or something ridiculous. They're close to 8 feet tall. He's insanely tall. He's huge, right? And so the guy in yellow is actually a very average height basketball player. Like, he is extremely tall on his own. But when I put him next to an excessively tall person, it diminishes his size. And it makes me make false judgments. Another fun activity with context effect. If you look at all these, you might notice that they are all faces. Hopefully that's what you garnered here, right? Bunch of different faces. Then if we go to this one and look at them, they all appear to be animals, right? But if I put them side by side, the end two are exactly the same, right? The faces, this looks like an old grandpa's face with his glasses there, his nose, his ear, and then his bald head. But the same picture down here is used as a rat. This is its ears, its little face, its feet, its back foot, and then its tail loops around. But based on the context that I put it in, you interpreted, or potentially interpreted, the picture very differently. You're even looking at these, like when I look at them, I'm like, oh yeah, I see a grandpa's face, and then this one would become a rat. Context effect is pretty fun to play with. If we were live in person, I would have you guys do interactive lessons. I still want to do something with extra credit potential here, but it might just look a little different. But this one, if you have French fries and you ask a little kid or even maybe an adult which one they like better, if you gave them the option of these fries in a McDonald's box and then one's just in like a bowl or like a brown paper bag and said which one tastes better, kids especially will be like, McDonald's ones, the McDonald's ones are so great. All I had done was take one and left it in the McDonald's cart and the other I just dumped into the bag. It just didn't have the marking on it that they were McDonald's fries, but people will eat those and think that the McDonald's ones taste vastly superior, instead of, oh, they taste exactly the same. And it's about the context you put them in. The context is that carton, right? And so you see this a lot of the time with people, in stores and store brand stuff. Some companies will make similar items, and if you put the generic brand on it, people won't want it as much and they'll pay more for the name brand thing when it actually is the same. It's exactly the same stuff. There are products out there that taste different, but like I think of like salsa, generic salsa versus whatever. Like it's not very different. I've had kids use it all the time with stuff like water's another fun one. The idea of people needing bottled spring water. If you filled up a spring water with tap water, though, or had 2 cups, one unmarked, both of them unmarked, and one being spring water and one being tap water, you probably wouldn't be able to know the difference. But people will buy the spring water because it says spring water on it. So context effect is really, really important. It helps us by giving us clues on what to expect and how our brain's supposed to interpret it. So the example is eel is on the wagon. You know it was wheel. Eel on the orange. Oh, you know it's peel. Like you're very quick at problem solving because you have the context there. We fill in information by working backwards and using perceptual sets that we have to understand what would make sense to us. So you match your top-down processing with your bottom-up, right? This is when they kind of meet in the middle and start solving these puzzles very, very quickly. We also have this interesting example of culture and perception being very, very different. When I look at this, I see a family sitting in a home and the lady has a window over her head and then this weird thing in the back. Like I see that as like a weird pillar or something someone has in their home, right? But based on your culture, if you were to ask a family from Africa what they saw here and where this family was, they would say, oh, they're sitting outside under a tree. This is a very stylized version of a tree. And this woman, it's not a window. She's carrying like a basket of something on her head because culturally, that's normal for them. Their families often gather under the shade of a tree. Women often carry things on their head. They don't live in homes with, square walls. So culture also affects our perception, which I think is really, really neat. So we're going to save optical illusions for part 2 of this, just because I only have about 2 minutes left. So, yeah, this is perception, how it works. So I always think sensation is your sense is taking in the information. And once your sense is taking the information and it goes to the specific part of your brains to process what you've heard, tasted, smelled, saw, then perception is you comb your entire brain to figure out what schema it matches or what it fits close to. And then you have to do like all this problem solving and figure out, do I understand it? Do I know what this means? Right? So like the fact that you're understanding my words right now, it's because you're combing through your brain and figuring out what these words mean very, very quickly, right? It's the same thing as if I showed you a weird object, which I don't have anything weird by me. Okay, this is kind of weird. A little thing like this. And I said, hey, do you know what this is? Right? Some of you might be like, no, but you could make an educated guess and be like, oh, it's a tool, right? And that's because of your perception. Your sensation lets you look at it and see it and examine it the best you could via computer. And then your brain combed the whole surface to perceive what you think it is. And so maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but you could be like, it looks like something that would be in a toolbox because it matches other things. It looks like it's made of metal and has little turning gears, right? And so with that, you would use perception to identify kind of what it fits into. What schema is it matching? What perceptual set may it fit in? If I told you if it was like, it was by this guy, as by an Allen wrench, maybe that would help too, right? So, all right. Perception, super fun, super interesting, very weird to think about this stuff. All right, catch you in part 2.